enough away that I feel comfortable looking like this.
Okay, we're now recording and being recorded. This is, what's today's date? November 5th, 6th,
November 6th.
2017, right between your birthday and Mom's birthday. It all began 78 years ago?
Almost 78 years ago.
Okay.
A week before, I am visiting Bert in Israel on the Moshav where he lives. I live in New Jersey and in a condo for 55 and overs. I live with a lover named Joe Oxhorn. And I go to Florida for the 4 months of the winter, December through March, at another condo, country club, where I play tennis, golf, and bridge a lot. Shall we go back to the beginning?
Let me just, if you
This
just
is
gave
the
your
present.
current situation, my current situation is Deborah and I have been together about 30 years or so. We have, my kids are here in Israel and her kids are here in Israel, and we moved between them and 18 grandchildren. And I think we still have a warm, loving relationship. She works a lot, I rest a lot. What else I can say about this? So Roberta goes to Florida in the winter, and I get to enjoy a week during my winter to visit her, up to now. And then in the summer, I've been going to meet Reve in South Dakota. And here and there, I'm working a little bit, and working a little bit in Russia, and this March we're going to work in Hungary. I've been in St. Petersburg and Moscow, and sometimes in London. I'm enjoying still working a little bit, but mostly I'm enjoying free time. Now here we are. I'm 75, she's 78, and we're going to try to do a little bit of reflection back. So Roberta started 2.5 years before me, so I'll give you the stage to...
Okay, we grew up in Brooklyn, New York at 6801 21st Avenue. Cloverdale 6, 1157 was our phone, but we did not get a phone until after World War II, when I was already 5 years old. In our day, telephones were something new for the lower middle class, which is what I think I grew up as, a lower middle class person, living in an apartment house.
Right, but before we had a personal telephone, I do recall that there was a phone installed in the lobby of our apartment building, and since we lived on the first floor, I remember that the phone would ring, you'd run to the phone, sometimes I would run. I'd answer the phone, and somebody say, I want Mrs. and Mrs. Teitelbaum on the 4th floor, and I would put the phone down and go up to the 4th floor, knock on her door, and tell her that she has a phone call, and she'd come down and talk to whoever would talk. So there was a central phone call, one phone for 48 families.
And then we got our phone. Our first phone was a party line. We shared it with another family in the building, and it was my mother's one and only enemy in the building. Her name was Irma, and they hated each other, my mother and Irma, and every time the phone would ring, we'd pick it up, they'd pick it up, and they'd be screaming at each other, is your phone call, or you're on the phone too long, or something awful like that.
Yes, I didn't remember we had party line phone. I didn't remember that Mom hated somebody, Irma. I thought the Bernhardts were our biggest enemy.
Well, they were also our enemy because they had 4 boys who used to harass and beat me up, all of us, and my father took them to court one time because she hit me over the head with a jump rope after I messed up one of their kids, something or other, and we went to court over it. But anyway, we're getting too detailed for anyone who's want to listen to any of this.
Okay, so you got the idea. We lived on the first floor of an apartment house of 48 families in Brooklyn, and mostly
we knew
you played with
everybody,
people.
and we played with people of all ages. You know, they started living in the building. It was very convenient to have friends and go to their house or play outside. We played stoop ball, punch ball, roller skating. What else?
What's your earliest memories?
My earliest memory is sitting in my high chair and screaming and crying I wanted to get out. And then my father came in and said, and I said, please let me out, I don't want to eat anymore. And he said, all right, if you finish your applesauce, and he gave me another big bowl of applesauce, then you could leave. So I thought of him as my rescuer.
Just one bowl of applesauce away from a perfect hero.
That is my first memory.
I have this thing, maybe there's a chance you can correct it for me. I have a memory that when I was about 2 years old, I can't believe that I can remember that far back, that I went to a funeral for the first time, and it was very, I don't know why I was at the funeral. I think I was much too young to be at a funeral, but I remembered having this experience that everybody that I knew was there. Like my grandmother and my mother and my father, and everybody was acting so strange, because they were dressed in black.
Oh, it must have been your grandfather's.
That's what I'm trying to figure out. Was I 2 years old when he died?
Yeah, you must have been, because Ira was named after him. He was dead just before Ira was born, and you were 3 when Ira was born. I don't remember the funeral at all.
I remember standing behind, somebody was sort of watching me, and I was sort of standing behind their leg, and I couldn't help it. I started to giggle. And it was like this tremendous embarrassment and discomfort, because everybody was acting so different than they normally acted around me. And I couldn't make sense of it. And best I can figure, that's what it was. Everybody was being so sober and sad.
Your mother's father.
And Mom was genuinely sad, I'm sure. And so I didn't understand how to deal with this demonstrative expression of sorrow. So I just kind of had this nervous giggle. That's what I remember. And I knew it was sort of weird and inappropriate because I was the only one laughing at this funeral.
I don't remember it at all. So
Okay.
I have no memory of being at a funeral for my grandfather. Though I do remember going to my grandmother's house. She lived in 97 India Street in Brooklyn. And it was 4 flights up, double flights of stairs to get to the top. And when we went in, the door, there were 2 doors. One was my grandmother's apartment, and one was a single bedroom that was attached to the apartment, but it had its own outside door. We'd open that door, go in, give my grandfather a carton of Chesterfield cigarettes and a bar of chocolate, and a giant bar of chocolate.
So I remember when it was, either I reconstructed it from stories you told me, or I remembered going up to that apartment and eating some of the chocolate with him.
Oh, I don't remember spending any time with him. I remember giving him the stuff, and then we went into the grandmother's place, and we didn't see him the rest of the time. We had dinner and lunch, you know, lunch or dinner, whatever we came to, at my grandmother's house with her daughter Beatty and my mother's brother Irving were there, and we'd have dinner and play. But I don't think we'd visit him again. He was in his room. He didn't come out and have dinner with us at all, as far as I can remember. But then he died, of course, before Ira was born, so I was 5.
But this is, it's interesting what kids can understand to be normal, because I never questioned or wondered how come we saw him for 15 minutes or something and went to Grandma. We could be there for several hours and never see him again, never mention him again. Right. And it was perfectly normal. It was just the way it was.
Right. I don't know what my mother did about that, but anyway.
Maybe she
had bad arthritis. He had bad arthritis, as far as I know, and that's why he couldn't walk well or come out of his bed, I guess, at that time.
Well, we don't know about that.
Okay, so move along. I had a newspaper.
But that was much later.
Heard about when I was 10, 11. Oh, okay. I remember the birth of my brothers very clearly.
My story about the birth of Ira is that Dad dropped us off at Grandma, and he took it at that time. I think women stayed a week or 10 days in the hospital. And my father, instead of saying, "Hey, what a wonderful opportunity to have quality time with his two children," is that what a wonderful opportunity to have some free time. He dropped us off with Grandma, and I don't remember seeing him till the end of the 10th day.
Right. He probably visited Mom though in the hospital every day. He said he visited her, and he went to work, and he visited her. So he did do that, but he didn't visit us.
But you had a nice. I remember the Grandma combing your hair.
Yeah, she used to use a fine comb. No, it was a fine comb like they use today for lice. She would comb it 100 strokes with this little comb, and she did that to her hair every night. And she washed her face with snow. When we were there in the winter, she would take snow from the windowsill and say it was very good to wash your face in the cold snow.
Must have done well for her
She
complexion.
was, yeah, she took me and bought a ring. I still have the ring that has my initials. I remember picking it out at a jewelry store. I went with her. I used to sleep over until, it's amazing how things happen, until 1948 there was a big snowstorm. And I was supposed to stay at my grandmother's for a number of days, and there was some snowstorm that my parents didn't have to go to work. So they were home with my brothers in Brooklyn having fun with the snow, and I was stuck and nobody could get me. It was, snowed in, and I was like inside with my grandmother, and I missed the opportunity for my parents not to be at work, I guess. And so I never slept at my grandmother's again.
That's
After
because,
that
and I
incident.
remember the other side of it, the snow accumulated into these huge hills, and we were able to take a sledding or sliding down the hills in the snowstorm. That's what I remember. I think might have even gone to Prospect Park and gone down some hills.
Well, we did that some other times. I
Okay,
remember
not sure
going
if
to
it's the
Prospect
same
Park on other snows, but this was 1948, the great big snowstorm. So I was 8, 48, I was 9, I
I
guess.
also remember the end of World War II, which was also a wonderful event. It's like Brooklyn, as big as it is, has 5 million or 6 million people at the time, was still like a small community, a neighborhood community. And each neighborhood had its own, everybody sort of knew each other. And I remember this enormous celebration where everybody out on the streets bringing out
Yeah, they had
trays
what
of
they
drinks
called
and
block
cakes.
parties, and they put up a big sheet, and they showed movies of the end of the war on the sheet, and they had everybody bringing food and drink, and it was Victory Over Europe. That was in April
Mhm.
of 45, and then they had it again, Victory Over Japan, so they had it twice, the block
Okay.
parties.
I guess
I
I remember the
remember
one over
those.
Japan. I was a little older then.
Okay, we lived at 6801 until I went to college, so, but I went to college at 16, I went to Brooklyn College at 16, and so my brothers were 10 and 11 and 14, I guess when we moved to,
West
I don't know,
Second
when we
Street.
moved to West Second Street. What grade were you in when you moved?
I think I was just starting high school.
High school? So
I'm
that
not
was
sure.
in
I don't think I
14.
continued 7th grade. So that's-
Yeah, I remember junior high school, all your friends watching the football. We were still in
6801.
6801 when you watched them then? I don't know. No, I think you watched them, but I guess you continued in high school watching football games with friends.
Right, but I do
So,
remember,
and,
that was always funny about between cars and televisions. Sometimes we were the first in the neighborhood to have a television, but I think probably the first in the neighborhood to lose it.
I don't remember losing a TV.
No, I don't remember, it was the cars that would come and go. The
Cars would come
come
and
and go.
TVs, I don't think. We weren't the first. We used to watch it every Burke's.
Oh, I
used to
don't
go
know, you
for
used to go to every
Every
break.
Burke's to
That
watch.
was our rich neighbor.
To watch
Rich
Milton
doctor
Berle,
neighbor,
doctor
okay.
across the street.
But
So I would go watch Milton Berle.
But I think we were one of the first in the building to have a
Maybe
TV,
in the
because I remember all my friends would come to my house to watch
Howdy
things
Doody.
like Howdy Doody, Captain Video, I think it was Captain Video, like the first space, like it was a prelude to Star Wars.
Oh,
the
Mr.
station.
Rogers? No, Rogers? No,
No, Mr. Rogers was
no,
much
not
later.
Mr. Rogers.
I think it was Captain Video.
Oh, was it Captain Video? Maybe. Yeah,
Yeah.
sounds
It
familiar.
was like as if he was like a space cadet and the whole thing
Yeah,
was
for
on a
all those
spaceship.
younger generation watching this was TV at the beginning, a telephone at the beginning.
Black and
we
white,
were at,
black
we
and
had
white
black
TV.
and white TV and no recording devices, no personal telephones, one phone.
Can you imagine actually the
One
TV?
phone for the whole family, or one bathroom for a family of 5
Right.
is what we had at 6801.
And the TV was like maybe a 12 or 13-inch screen, say, in a console that was like a giant closet. Nothing.
That's it, yeah, that's part of it.
And
First, before that, no, we used to listen to the radio. We had a console radio. We'd sit in the living room like I'm sitting now and talking to you. And I'd sit here, the family would sit around and listen to radio shows on the air, like Lux radio program and The Shadow, and we'd listen in the car also when we were driving on Sunday home from
But
my
one of the-
grandmother's to some of these shows.
one of the things I have to say about that really shaped my experience of relationship in a positive way was that when we sit in the living room listening to the radio or watching TV, my mother and father would sit in the couch that was the furthest back, and I would sit sort of halfway up in the room, and every once in a while I'd glance back at them, and I was a mixture of touched and embarrassed to see them sitting arm in arm with each other, often kissing each other, but being physically affectionate. And so I think I really got a good model in that respect in the early days of their relationship, that they really were made it acceptable to show affection to each other in a warm way, and that's how gave me a good idea of how couples can be.
Right, that was true.
Later, of course,
And
they
I
got to
found
fight
out-
so much that it was not a good example.
But I also heard from my Aunt Min, who was my father had 5 sisters and 2 brothers. He was the youngest of 8. And Aunt Min was the youngest of the fifth sister, who I was pretty friendly with. Anyway, she had a 90th birthday in Sarasota, and I went there. And her friend, who lived next door to the grandparents when Min was growing up, was also 90 years old and was at this party. And she told me that she never saw anything like the relationship between Min's father and mother, which is my grandmother and grandfather. Pearlbinder and Meltzer were their maiden names. And their relationship that of hugging and kissing each other, of us, the grandmother sitting on his lap and feeding him his food and hugging and kissing sometimes at mealtime.
This was
So I
Dad's
guess my
parents.
father got that example from his parents, so that he acted in that way with his wife. Not so with my mother's family, who she seemed to tell me were always fighting each other, and with their older sister and with each other. They had to call police. There was the police. There were so many fights in their family.
Right, so that I think my father had a good model of a loving family, and plus he had a lot of sisters. So he had a lot of sort of junior mothers too.
Right, since he was the baby in the family.
And actually that was I think characterized the split. Our dad's family was really often enjoyed getting together, even though they enjoyed being sarcastic, fighting with each other, arguing with each other,
Mainly playing
chasing
cards,
each other,
no,
playing
loving
cards.
to play cards.
Right, but they really enjoyed getting together and got together often, where my mother's family was much more divided. But we had really good times with grandmother. I remember her being also a great cook and really enjoying spending time while she was cooking the food in the kitchen with her at her house, that I really liked it. But this is a lesson. I like this idea of a lesson for future generations. I loved my mother's mom, my grandmother, a lot. I enjoyed when she came over. I enjoyed just sort of listening to her, watching her. She'd sometimes give me a little food to taste and so on. But I want to say she ruined the relationship when somehow she got the idea that every time she came to visit us at our house, she gave me a quarter when she was leaving. It started off as a quarter, which to me was a lot of money at the time. But what happened is that I stopped enjoying her visit and just was waiting for my quarter. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure if this is more about, I guess at least as much about me as about her. But as far as I'm concerned, she poisoned the relationship by making it a ritual to give me money, and I stopped listening to what she was saying or being attentive to her, just waiting for her to go so I can get my quarter. I'm sorry, but
That's worked out the same thing with my kids. We used to take Michael to visit Amy and Leslie when they were at sleepaway camp and visiting day. They, it would really be hard at the end of the day to leave when they're going to be at camp for another 4 weeks. And so we've always bought these presents for them to give them when we're ready to leave, so they'd have something to do instead of crying and running after us and saying, take us home. And so Michael, of course, we had to buy him a present too, since he was with us. But then it turned out to be that he just wanted to say leave all the time because he wanted his present. So the whole time the other 2 girls were saying, stay, stay, where are you going? Michael was like, can't we leave already? Can't we leave already? So we learned to give him his present before we came, and their present when we left. But it took a few times to realize that it was all up to presents have a lot to do with the quality of your time.
Yeah, but basically how you corrupt an emotional and effective relationship by making it a material exchange.
Yeah, well, I don't remember caring about the money one way or the other.
Okay,
So.
well, no matter mattered more. Maybe you had more than I
I didn't have anything or want anything. Okay, so what happened? So That was childhood together as having two
Well-
brothers. I remember Ira, when Ira came home from the hospital, I totally remember part of Bert's memory, which is my memory of it, is my mother bringing this baby and sitting there and breastfeeding, and I looking at this as like an adorable little baby. Couldn't wait to get my hands on the baby and do things. And Bert will tell his story.
That's it. That's exactly
The Bert story.
the validation that every child in the same family has a different life experience of the same events, even with the same parents or different parents. I was resentful that my mother had left for 10 days, and I was a more dependent 3-year-old at the time than you were. So I was really angry that my mother had left and disappeared. Actually, both parents had disappeared for 10 days. You know, the first time I saw my father, he just picked us up at my grandma's house, brought us home, dropped us off, left us with a neighbor, and went to get Mom. So I was really angry when, by the time my mother and father came back with Ira, and I remember just sort of cold shouldering her and walking to the back, out in the backyard with my favorite little fire truck, thinking I would do a few turns on this little fire truck. It was like a wooden truck that you pushed with your legs, you could sit on. Move with your legs. After a few turns, I got ready, waiting. My mother never came. I was expecting to, as if I really wanted her to run after me and beg forgiveness and say she was sorry she left me for all these days and whatever else I had in mind. But she never came. She chose instead to get, I think she was insulted that I walked out. And so she stayed breastfeeding Ira, but feeling hurt that I ignored her. And I waited till I think it got dark, and I was cold and hungry. I gave up my dignity and my pride to come back in.
Yeah, so, okay, that's enough for now.
And that's it. Now, that's not, no, we'll do one sitting, just once I continue. So then we grew up, I remember when we first started, you started school. That was a great period. I think I would have been a pretty mediocre or dumb student because I wasn't the sharpest tool in the box, I would have to say. But from the moment Roberta started first grade, I think every day she'd come home and she was like, she would exercise practicing, and that's my recollection. She would teach us what you learned in school by being the teacher, and Ira and I were the pupils. And you'd make, you'd give lessons to us. Sometimes it became embarrassing spelling games because my brother could be 3, 4 years old or 5 years old and he could spell better than I could. But I remember
But he was smart enough to read the bread off the bread, whereas Bert tried to actually spell it by himself.
the critical word was wonder. My humiliating experience was on the word wonder. Roberta, it was a spelling contest she gave us, and she gave the word wonder, and I failed it, and Ira read the bread box. Anyway, but I think we learned a lot about addition, subtraction, language, sentence construction, whatever you were teaching us. I remember you played teacher with the two of us, sitting around the kitchen table. So I got a good head start. I never went to kindergarten. I started from first grade at 5 1/2, and I think I would have been a big failure if it wasn't for all the advanced training. So. But I still did get a lot of sort of, with this kind of look of the teacher's sort of disappointment. You're Roberta's brother? This disappointment because she was this A student and I was sort of stumbling along. So that part was cute, but I ended up, I think, thanks to Roberta, being quite motivated to do well in school, and eventually did fairly well. I mean, like I said, I was the highest academic achieving football player, which is not saying a lot, but since there was only 2 Jewish football players on the team in high school, as far as I recall, and I was smarter than Gene, but but basically it was like, I think Roberta was all A's, I got sort of B pluses, and I think I got a lot because I had a lot of advanced practice and drill. But then somewhere I think we did okay, and then I was in elementary school when you started this newspaper. So I think you can tell about this. This thing was amazing. Roberta, she was 5 years old, was a teacher, but she was like a really adult child who not only was a high achiever in school, but could really translate it, had a lot of confidence and initiative. And I think one of the best manifestations got this inspiration from watching, I guess, I'm not sure if the
No, it's-
telethons was the inspiration, or
Not at
what
all.
was the
No,
inspiration
no,
for
I don't know. It was just that we got the daily news every day.
Okay,
I
we
don't
got
know.
the daily newspaper.
We got the daily news as our newspaper. I decided to start a newspaper. I don't know, I was 10. I got all the children that I was friendly with to be on my newspaper staff, and I gave out assignments. You write about this, you write about something or other. And I got a woman in the building who was a secretary at the, in the high school, in Lafayette High School, yeah.
Oh.
At Lafayette High School, who had access to a mimeograph machine she got me stencils, and I typed all the newspaper and made a headline.
But
Divided
yeah.
columns, asked questions like they did in the Daily News, used the format of the paper as, a guide, and even sold advertisements to the neighborhood stores for 25 cents. And typed it all up myself, edited everybody's article. Most of the people who wrote for the newspaper were younger and not too literate.
Like me and
I
Ira.
rewrote, I rewrote all the stories.
I remember Ira wrote a poem for that got
Thanksgiving,
included.
his first edition, I think my first Thanksgiving was something, he was 6,
Right, so.
5, he
But-
dictated it, I think.
But it is about the idea that in the apartment house is all these kids, and they become kind of a community. So I think Roberta simply organized all the kids from the building, and there was at least 8, 10
And
of
then
them.
we sold it to the neighbors at 2 cents a copy or 3 cents a copy, and the advertisements at 25 cents. Somehow after a year or two, a year and a half,
Or 3,
so
I'm not sure.
I don't know, we had like a couple of $150 maybe, and we went to New York to the telethon that was running on the TV, and we just walked in with our money to give the $150 with some of the members of the papers, and we got on TV. They put us right on TV. We gave our money. Dennis James was the host. He kissed me on TV, and I got calls at home from the New York Times, the Daily News, TV shows to be on TV. There's one in every family, the Magic Horseshoe, and 2 newspapers came and wrote up our story. And CBS News did a 60-second. They used to have a human interest story of the day for like a minute, and they spent an entire day in my house filming. My parents worked. The newspaper was coming CBS News was coming to record it, and other neighbors said, "Oh, can we have it in our house because nobody's home in your house?" And my parents said, "Well, I'm not staying home, but it's Roberta's newspaper. She can have it wherever she wants." So they all came to my house for the day. It took a whole day of filming for this 1-minute video. And
I remember
no
that they
parents stayed
arranged how we
home
sat
or
on the
anything.
couch and orchestrated the script.
yeah, so I have this somewhere at home. I had a copy of this 8mm 60-second film that ran on CBS 6 o'clock news. And so that's how the newspapers called me and the TV shows once they saw the 60-second thing that took and that's when I learned the Daily News always lies, the New York Times tells the truth. The Daily News came, they took us to a police station and the fire station and took pictures of us getting news from the policemen and the firemen, which we never did. And then they put that on the centerfold of the Daily News. I wonder if we could get the copies, but anyway. The Times came, they took pictures of one of my members of the team selling an ad to the florist who was our best customer, and they wrote the true story of how we wrote gossip and where we got our news. So I learned at an early age which newspapers to trust.
So that was a memorable moment.
And then I went to junior high school, and this person who was this leader who had a detective agency in my neighborhood did a school newspaper, ran all the people in my building because they'd come begging, "Why aren't you playing with this child?" I don't know. You know, they'd come begging me that you're not playing with my child enough, or all this, I don't know. And then I got to junior high school the first semester. I was elected president of the class by all these people who came from all different schools who didn't know anybody, that well. I got elected president of the class. And then I looked around and became an adolescent and thought I was too businesslike. Marlene told me, oh, you're so businesslike. I mean, she was like impressed that I had a desk at home and I signed her autograph book, you know, I had a sheet of paper that I took it to my desk to fill it out because of course I copied from these sayings. I didn't want to just write anything on my own. I had a book of sayings to copy from, so I took it to my desk. She said, oh, you're so businesslike. And I got to junior high school and decided that, oh my God, I'm too masculine, I'm too pushy, I'm too aggressive, I better be a little girl that wants to be popular. And from then on, I never took a lead, anything, I never did anything, junior high school or college. That was me that I wanted to do. I just did whatever I thought the popular thing to do was.
Actually, that's in junior high school, I discovered the first thing that I really loved to do something. Somewhere in the 4th, 5th grade, I started to draw a lot. In the 6th grade, I was actually drawing, and then I was selected for an experimental art program in junior high school that was actually in Sethlow Junior High School. So it was the first time of the first group of a special junior high school class that was going to emphasize art, and that's how we did sculpturing and oil painting, and I really loved. I wasn't very talented, I'd have to say, but I really loved it. That was my first passion, even before sports. And so while you were losing your confidence, I was finding my confidence in junior high school.
Because I was in a gifted program, and I was in a gifted program with all smart people, and then we learned not to show that we're smart when you're a girl, you know, not to be too aggressive, let the boys, you know, be popular or whatever. Or the girls who had the biggest breasts and you know, most developed were looked at as the best to be.
Most desirable.
And I didn't have a breast yet, so I felt I was
much less
than.
two.
Anyway, that was the start of my downfall, the beginning of yours, right?
Well, that was my first downfall.
The beginning of your good passions, which I'm a believer in.
But it was kind of funny. I really came to think that, like you said, we had in common a certain core of insecurity, because the way Roberta said she went to her desk to copy what to write in the book. I was, artistically, I really enjoyed it and loved to do it. I never trusted really what I had inside. I would look for things to be able to copy or to imitate or and then to reproduce, because I didn't feel safe to bring my own ideas or creation. But I really loved, would be drawing horses and pirates and heroes. But those, mostly I could do it from comic books, from photographs, from paintings. So it was really good. I enjoyed the technical skill of painting, and I enjoyed the process of it, but I didn't know how to really bring creativity, my own inner creativity to it until much later in life. So in the end, when I made the choice, really, to listen to your inside. So just where you had that from the beginning, and insecurity gave it up. I didn't have it from the beginning. And it was much, much later that I could actually paint from my own inspiration and not from imitation or copying. But I gave up art for football because I felt it much more expressed my inner world than my technical skill in drawing and painting.
That's a choice, that's good. You made a choice, which got you to a good college. I just followed the crowds to Brooklyn College and became a teacher, because my mother said it's good in case your husband dies or something tragic happens. You'll have an occupation that'll be good. And, you know, I did it assuming that I would just find a husband and never have to work. Like, you know, I was before the real feminist times came, you know, the hippie eras of the 60s, because I went to college from 56 to 1960. So the more feminist, do your own thing era came in after I had already graduated and was teaching.
And actually my high school football coach, Sam Ritigliano, helped me to get to college. And I was actually going to go play big time college football at the Air Force Academy. And they'd arranged for a Senate appointment for me to be going to the Air Force Academy. And I didn't know when I filled out the application not to write down that I wear glasses. So I wrote down that I wear glasses, I had gotten the approval, I was already going into the Air Force Academy in Colorado when the papers hit Washington, went through the medical review board, and they saw I had checked off the box of wearing glasses. Now the rule was you can't come to the Air Force Academy if you don't have 20/20 vision when you enter. The day after you're in, they test your eyes, and if you don't have 20/20 vision, they just remove you from the pilot training course, the jet fighter training course, but then you can still be a helicopter pilot or a navigator or anything else. But I stupidly checked off the box and eliminated myself from contention. So, stupidly or unconsciously. So, rather than become an Air Force engineer, my high school coach found this small college in New England, Tufts University, which turned out to be an incredibly wonderful experience of a small college, small private college, like Little Ivy League, that was intimate and friendly, the connections, you knew everybody, you knew all the teachers and professors and their families. It was a wonderful community in a small town of Medford, Massachusetts, like literally the classical college that I don't think exists anymore, of I think 2,500 students.
Well, it does, Colgate's like that.
I mean, that's 2.5 the size, 2,500 students in a sort of isolated community where all the surrounding village serves the college campus community, and you're living on the college. You're intermingling with class people from all over the world, and rubbing elbows with your teachers and professors on a first name basis.
That's the experience I think Amy had at Colgate.
Yeah. So I thought it was wonderful, and I was really blessed that it took me from a relatively, I think, low-functioning, I said I was in the high 80s, so I can't say low-functioning, but in the high 80s achievement scoring, to really loving learning, to being excited about intellectual things, and eventually found my way to becoming a psychologist because of the inspiration of some of my teachers. So I think that I was blessed to have to fall into, thanks to football and checking off that box that I wear glasses, a wonderful university experience that led me all the way to get my my PhD in psychology, in clinical psychology.
And get the, what do you call it, that hero, the
unsung hero.
Unsung hero in football for being the coach's delight or whatever. Not the best player, but the best sport.
I'd say the most devoted or most determined, or contributed the most in a quiet way. I have to say the truth about this is that I was one of the few players on the team that from my sophomore year, I was playing regularly on defense. I was an inside linebacker, and everybody knew in my senior year I should have been the captain. But this is where racism, hidden racism, it usually had to do with the captains were from certain fraternities, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant fraternity, and I actually joined a more Jewish fraternity. Again, because I didn't even know it was more Jewish, it just happened that these people really started recruiting me so ardently. I just fell in. They would give me rides home, they would be really attentive and seductive, so I just became my friends, and I didn't catch it that this was a more Jewish fraternity, but I joined them because they were the people, the upperclassmen I was most connected to. But it turned out that the captain of the football team usually came from this like the jock fraternity, which also wanted me to join, but I was less connected to them. So I joined the other one, and so I was clearly supposed to be the only player on the team that had been playing already for 3 years full time, and I come to the senior year. And people came and said they were just a political thing, that they wanted someone from this particular fraternity to always be the captain, the jock fraternity, so I wasn't selected. And they made me instead the captain of the lacrosse team, which I also played, but that was in the spring. That was my consolation prize. But then when I look back on it, that was actually anti-Semitism. It was partly because I wasn't the right person in the right group to be the football captain. But other than that, I wasn't even aware of it at the time, because most of the people, ironically, who were the people that were from the jock fraternity were really good friends. We really were friendly, so they were uncomfortable as well to tell me that they didn't choose me for captain, but they had to choose their fraternity member. So that was my first experience, I guess, of mild anti-Semitism and but I loved my college experience, and I loved altogether the level of competition that was really not about seeking to be a professional athlete, but being part of a group of teammates and camaraderie and a friendly competition.
Okay, now we go on to married life, and we get there next, which is the wonder of it all. I had my first child at 31, and I realized this was what life was meant for me. The love I felt for my child, for Amy, like no other love I had ever experienced or knew of, and I knew that I was created for this role as mother. So therefore I connected back to the luck of having chosen the right husband to have the most perfect children for me. That all worked out, and I felt loved, happy, ecstatic, loved being pregnant, loved having babies more than anything on my breast. Could understand how my grandmother had 8. I could have done that too. I loved the pregnancy and giving birth, and I only regretted that I had my 3 so much closer than I couldn't keep that babyish going long enough on each one, as I realized that was what I loved the best. But then I got to be a grandmother, and I realized you get to love other people again and have that same experience, the loving, not quite the same, but a slight substitute for having grandchildren and be able to cuddle and love and hold and see new development of children, which, I just love watching them and seeing how they are and who they are, and re-experiencing a lot of that joy of having children. I think husband and love and all of that in perspective, I really had a nice relationship. It was a little tough at times, but I could have been a nicer person to my husband, I think. But on the whole, I really enjoyed my life all the time, every minute of every day, so I can't say I have any bad feelings. I could have been a better wife. Is my conclusion. I could have been a better, more caring wife as I was a mother, but as my life. But I really could not have chosen a better person as a father to my children to make it work every day easy for me and pleasurable, because I always had an agreeable person about bringing up the children. We totally agreed on every aspect of what should be done and what was most important at all times. And he was the most sacrificial person I ever met since Michael won that scholarship to pay for all college, graduate school, summer internship programs. Nobody had ever in their life of that award turned it down and was willing to pay. The person before him who was there that Michael met had gotten into Harvard and was still feeling bad that he couldn't go to Harvard. But his parents, who were very wealthy and could well afford anything, said, "What, you won this award, you get to go to North Carolina as a, I forgot what it's called already, some kind of scholar, a Moorhead scholar, which means, according to them, that the world is open up to you. You're known as a Moorhead scholar, and you go on to great things. You get into any graduate school you want. You have internships with the best people every summer. They pay for you to travel the world." And Irwin said, "Look, Michael, you always wanted to go to Brown. I'm not going to." And Michael really didn't care. He would have gone to North Carolina and been a Moorhead scholar. He didn't really, care which school he went to. but he had, we had looked at it as the epitome of, Ivy League and much better school than going to this big school. And so we had him go. And Lawrenceville punished Michael for that by not giving him awards he was supposed to get at graduation. Teachers told us, and because nobody had ever turned down. It was very prestigious to have a kid who gets the Moorhead from their school, and when he turned it down, they were not happy. But Irwin was the type of person who If he believed something was right, he just went for it and, did what he thought was best and right, which was an unbelievable trait that he worked all his time. I would say, I'd have my fun every day. I played tennis, I played bridge. What's your fun? He says, my fun is sitting here thinking of what I can do for my family. I really enjoy thinking of what would be best for everybody and how to implement it. So I have to say that about your father. My husband, Erwin, he was like really a really good person, even if you had your fights with him, I had my fights with him. But.
Now let me say this. My experience of Erwin was different than Roberta's.
Okay.
One of the things that was interesting about marriage, though, is that I think Carol and I married in the late 60s and went to California together. And I think we were a good team in giving each other the sort of the courage to be really adventurous. We both finished our PhDs in 1969. We both put our worldly possessions in the back of my car and drove across the country to a new world of California and began our careers together. So on one side it was a very good choice for getting the kind of supporting each other to be really adventurous and daring and go far away and take a big risk of doing something very different than the university had prepared for us. So California at that time, psychotherapy and mental health and public mental health was very open, wild, liberal, creative. And it was the beginning of humanistic psychology, alternative transpersonal psychology, was all happening in Northern California. So together we support each other that way. But it was another interesting lesson. I think I made a transference to Carol that not everybody who claims to really know what's good for you really has your best interest at heart. I think I had so much counted all my life that Roberta, who was sometimes quite forceful in what she thought was the right thing to do, I often listened to her and trusted that she was really trying to think about what's good for me. But I found the same music, the same tone of voice, Carol often presented it as what's my best interest, but really wasn't. And so that really ended up souring our relationship because I couldn't distinguish where she was actually being like my sister and where she was being a more self-centered Carol. So in the end we really burnt out the relationship because I was too passive sometimes in listening to her. So I like very much you said when you could have been a better parent, I could have been a better partner, but I was more clear about it as I'm responsible for taking care of my boundaries and not her. And so I let the relationship get really to become poisonous by giving in too much until I couldn't tolerate it any longer. So I think I learned from that about making clear boundaries of what's acceptable and unacceptable. But I appreciate that relationship for getting us into the great adventure and going on the journey, but we couldn't sustain ourselves in that journey, so we ended up divorcing after 4 years. And eventually then I came to Israel and found in Smadar a great mother. I share with Roberta. I more or less saw myself as a kind of sardu, a kind of spiritual person who was just sort of wandering the earth in the best of my understanding of Eastern philosophy, until Yael was born, and I was there in the room watching him being born, and it was the most miraculous experience, not only of his actual birth, but of the transformation in my own feeling of opening up a place of love, attachment, and affection that I had never known before or had no idea existed. So he took me, that experience, that moment, took me to another place of loving. It was a brand new discovery of my eyes opening up and my heart opening up. And so I became, I think, similar to Roberta, really invested in being a parent. And then it was no problem then to have a second child and a third child, because the joy of fatherhood, of being a parent.
Right. You put it so nicely, but it's exactly how I felt. This absolute love that you never knew anywhere. You don't feel that same one to your parents or to your lovers and love.
Well, no, that's
I didn't. I mean, it wasn't the same.
You had a single marriage for 30 years or so. How long were you married?
39.
39 years with Erwin, and I had it different after I left Carol, and I was with Smadar for several years. But basically, that was became my standard of what I'd want to happen and how I'd want to feel in an adult relationship. And so I had many other relationships along the way that I would drop them because I knew that it didn't awaken, it didn't touch me the way that having the children touched me. So until I found Devorah. And with Devorah, I found that was in that place of totally soft, like that just you look at the person, like still like sometimes, but now I look at my adult children, it doesn't always happen, but sometimes I can just remember for a second and look at them again, and just looking at them brings back this kind of radiant smile, inner smile, and inner joy, and this softness. So I do think I have that, and I did have the good fortune to have that in an adult relationship, that the having the child, so this is the level of love I now know is possible in my body, and this is what I want in my life. And so, and I do think it's up to you, it's not up to the partner, it's not exactly, I mean there is something really about the partner that makes it's possible or not possible, and with Devorah it's possible that you can go to that place the way you have that wholehearted acceptance and love and delight of another human being that you have with our children, can be with another adult, but it's about you, me, going to that place in me and connecting to it. So this has been happened with Devorah and still happens. So, but I think like the parenting experience, and I think and I saw that with you. Like I used to enjoy being, before I had children, I was an uncle. But the uncle had the advantage of really loving her children, but then I could leave. And then when I got tired of it, so it wasn't that you stayed through the night and the crying or something. When I had enough of a visit, I just could pick up and leave. But I got that feeling of Roberta's love for her children and the embrace and the warmth in visiting at some of those times.
Yeah, well, you spent that month with me in just after Leslie was born. That's when you were leaving for Israel, was October. Mm-hmm. After Leslie was born in September of '73. Isn't that October when you were on your way to Europe with
Gay,
and it was with the trailer and the dogs.
Yeah, yeah. That was an adventure.
But anyway, wasn't that October on your way to Israel? When did you get to Israel? November.
No, I only got to Israel about March, April, because we spent all this time traveling around Europe. I spent the travel around Europe. But first we went for a couple of months, First we went for a couple of months to our home in England and spent time in Dover and stuff, and then I left her there because I didn't have that loving feeling. This was even before my kids were born.
Oh, okay. But you were with me in October when Leslie was a month old, and Amy was 2 in a month. I was with those two little babies before you left to have your own.
No, but I was back and forth before then, so I got to see more of your mother.
No, not at all. Then you were in
75.
Then you went to the.
This is.
Wait a minute. That was '73 when Leslie was born in September, and you got there in March, and you impregnated. What's her name in '75?
What's her name?
75. In '75, I'm bad at names. Good at cards.
No, actually '74 because Hale was born in April of '75.
Right. So it was '74.
Yeah.
So you left in '73. Yeah.
Okay, right.
What month? June, whatever. So it was right after you got there. 3
Not
months
right
into
after.
it. 3 or 4 months
Okay.
into it. I said I got there. I mean, I came with the kids to Israel and saw you when she was pregnant, when you told me about this great phenomenon.
Anyway, it's
Having
really
a
amazing.
kid on the kibbutz, that you were going to have a kid on the kibbutz and still travel and live your life and just leave the kid. It was a great place to bring up children. You saw how nice psychologically it was good to have children, believe them, and be committed and visit. Right.
That was another one, I was going to say, unrealistic moment
Right.
that I didn't plan on how attached I'd become to these particular people.
Right. So, anyway, that's life till now. Okay, can we stop this?
Well, I think there's one other thing. I think we want just one other thing. What it is to be now. I'd like to put this down because the people who are going to be listening to this are maybe 20, 30, 40, I don't know when, what age you'll be, but somewhere you might get to be our age, 78 and 75. And I think I have to say something about that. I'm amazed about this experience, for example, of being 75. I'm older than the people around me. Sometimes inside, I really, it's psychologically true. I knew it as a psychological idea that you're every age you ever were. And it is amazing to me that it's more phenomenologically true even than the idea of it. Because I do find that sometimes I'm playing with some of the kids, and I can't quite get down on my knees, but I can play chess or checkers with them, or whatever game they might be playing, or building with magnetic things, and I can be playing with the same kind of spirit as if I can feel like I'm an 8-year-old or 9-year-old, playing with them, and it doesn't matter about winning, it's just the fun of playing. And so Matan can decide suddenly the knight is going to jump all across and capture a pawn across the board. What do I care? So it's like playing whatever rules he wants to play. I try to teach him how the pieces move, and sometimes he moves accordingly. So I find myself ready to be a non-competitive 8-year-old. Sometimes I can be sitting around and Deborah and I are talking, and I look at her and I feel like I'm a teenager. I'm like a 15-year-old, and kind of that warmth and affectionate, and other times I'm in my 20s when we're playing. I can't really run very much, but we play this miniature tennis, and I can get into sort of competing with or Shalev and or some other kids that I see on something, and so I see I really go, and I can move from ages into my 20s. All I remember is that I was in my teenage, being in my 30s already seemed old. So I don't have so much like 30, 40. I don't have a differentiation for that. It seems to me I'm in my 20s, I'm in my teenagers, I'm in my latency age, and sometimes I'm an absolute baby when I get really hurt about something. I feel like this I'm 3 years old again. And then sometimes I feel like I'm really 75. And it's just sort of like somehow I'm no longer a warrior hero. I'm kind of old and sort of not exactly not wise, but sort of just having to accept the situation I cannot change or cannot control. So it's a marvelous phenomenon to have this. I don't know if you had the same experience. And yesterday we visited Miriam, and I think that's what really got us. That our bodies are deteriorating. My mobility is increasingly less. I just told the other day, someone offered me a horse. And I was so excited about it, and when I was in my 20s, in my early 30s, I had 2 horses, and I loved it. And I just saw myself riding around on the horse being 30 again. And then I realized I could hardly get my leg over the ATV to sit on the ATV, which is about a meter off the ground. I'm trying to think, how am I going to get my leg 1.5 meters or 2 meters up in the air to put my foot in the stirrups to get on the horse? I realized it's impossible. And so the physical limitations, so I gave up the idea of this free horse because I couldn't, unless I had a ladder, I couldn't get on and off. So it's like somehow accepting the changes in your body that are more and more limitations. I used to love playing tennis, but I can't do that so much. I play basketball sometimes with Shalev or Aron, but I can hardly get off the ground, if at all. So there's a weird thing about accepting more and more physical limitations. I get tireder, I have less energy. I used to be able to stay up overnight in my 20s or 20s, and I would go the next day and I wouldn't feel a thing. Now, if I stay up overnight by some circumstance, it takes me 2 or 3 days to recover. So I do see there's a lot of changes that you need to get used to, and I find myself mostly getting used to, except all the ones we saw of Miriam of just having memory lapses, not remembering things, and being increasingly physically limited. This looks like something you somehow learn to accept and take it easy. I guess I see it Herb and Helen are good examples of they're mentally functional, they suffer a lot physically, but they seem to take it easy. So what do you have to say about getting old?
No, okay.
What's your experience?
For most of the time, until the last year or so, I still felt like I'm in my 20s, early 19, 21. I run around. I felt like, first of all, I feel like I'm my father at his dreamy, could play cards and ball. that was like he loved and he felt like that, and I feel like I lived that life since I retired. That's all I mostly do, is play tennis and now a little golf and cards, a lot of bridge, which I love and takes me out. And I felt physically able to walk, go on trips and climb, and I really felt good physically. And also I loved getting down on the floor, like Bert said, playing with grandchildren and playing these games. I felt like I could play lots of times before as a child again, or a teenager. I felt like I could be on their level and love it. And lately, I feel the difference, definitely feel the difference. Like I'm getting old, my knees hurt, my whole leg has been hurting this whole trip. I've been walking so much slower, and I can't just, the thought of going up the steps to get something, I think twice.
Yeah.
Whereas before I used to just run up and down and get it. So it's like really new for me. This is like the last year. I don't know, you can ask my kids. I mean, they saw it more, but it seems like this last year there's been a big difference physically. So I don't have to see how it played out. I did a trip. I enjoyed it, but I was hurting most of the time walking around. So.
And I have this part about, I really like getting down on the ground with my kids and my grandkids, but now I think twice about it, because getting down is not the problem, it's about getting up. And so between my knees and my lack of flexibility in my knees and hips, it really becomes a project to get up without something hurting when I do it. So, well, the other thing about, something we were doing the other day, the risk about falling.
Right, we're talking about riding bikes that we would.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's the balance. Your balance isn't good when you get older.
No, I had no problem. I got on the bike. I fixed up some bikes that I had here, and I got on the bike and I started to ride it. And suddenly I was in this panic experience that normally I would, if the bike started falling or was stumbling, I just would flip my leg over the seat and land on holding the steering wheel and end up on my feet running. And I suddenly realized that the problem getting my leg over the bar is that I'm going to end up smashing on my face before I could get off and dismount the bicycle if I lost my balance.
But it was interesting about Miriam. Now Miriam was a kind of person who was very intense. I wouldn't say she was anything like me who takes life easy. She was a very hospitable, warm, wonderful person, but she was very worried all the time whether she was, cooked this thing right, or even though she entertained many people. Now that she can't remember whether she said, she kept saying, I can't remember, even having dinner for large parties and entertaining the way you're telling me I did. She was a happy-go-lucky person, so forgetting her anxiety is one of the things that's
the trade-off, right?
That she's gotten now. I see like her anxiety is all gone.
Yeah, that's what you said about Marty. Marty was like the happiest person.
Yeah, Marty was also, he didn't know who I was when I saw him. So that's one of the things about getting older and forgetting everything, which, I don't know about that. I don't want to.
No, I get very anxious. I mean, I do forget people's names and stuff. And I find myself not my grandchildren, not my children, not my grandchildren, not your children, not your grandchildren. But basically, the names just go blank sometimes, and it is
very bad thing.
A very uncomfortable feeling of deteriorating. It's unpleasant, but deteriorating, and so this is aging. And I make a lot of jokes, and Laverne, I make a lot of jokes about another senior moment, or senior senility.
No, I mean with the kids, I used to really want to play ball with them and run around and go to all their things, and now I come over to Leslie's kids and they want to play punch ball or something. I'm like, oh yeah, can I really get out there and catch the ball and take a few steps, But I've gotten to those activities that I used to do with them. Feeling I can't do it, but
on the upside, while the physical level deteriorates, I think just the fact that Roberta's here and we're making this tape is that actually relationship and family connection becomes increasingly important. I value it, and I cherish the moments that we have together. I cherish the history that we share, and I think it just altogether relationships, while they become fewer, become more valuable to me and more important. I'm much more reflective about my relationship with my children and what I can do, what part I play in their life to support their life as it's going, and so I think the involvement in one's family life has grown a lot
Oh, it's
more.
great.
And as a professional, I'm still working like 3, 4, 5 clients a week. And that it's another different level when you're sort of at the place of retirement, where each hour that I spend in work is much more thoughtful and attentive. And I think I have a different quality of presence than when I was busy with my career and seeing 8 or 10 people in a day and just getting tired and trying to make it, and to some extent, both being available to the people, but also just trying to make it through the day, versus cherishing the hour that I have with somebody, or the meal that I take one of my grandchildren to lunch and so on.
Oh, yeah,
So-
no, I feel that way. Any moment I spend with my children and grandchildren, I look forward to and I want, as much
So-
as possible. I try to sneak in on all your vacations and everything so I could spend time just being there, watching the relationships. I love just watching the family dynamics of each family and how they interact with each other
Yeah, well, so
and how they feel.
ironically, when I'm losing my body and losing my mind, my experience is that I feel like I have more to give in terms of the moment-to-moment, face-to-face contact of and the interaction and the presence in my feeling, in my heart, and my affection.
And I'm very lucky because I feel like I have 3 children who really want me around, beg me to come all the
Yes.
time, and so I don't feel like I'm imposing on them. I feel like they really would like me to come and visit and see them.
That they're glad to have you
Yeah.
involved in their children's life.
Just-
And I think this is also something that both of us share. This is where we do have the same parents, because our parents were so busy sometimes at the survival level, as Roberta said, the lower middle class, and they were working people most of their lives. They were busy working 6 days a week, and so they by necessity were employees of other people who to some extent dictated the hours that they worked, and they weren't always available for our activities and events. And so I think both of us have spent a lifetime having an idea that we want to be there as much as we can for our children, and then for our grandchildren when we can.
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Any other last thing?
No, I'm glad I came to Israel and
And
saw 16.
And thank you for being
No,
my big
18,
sister.
18 grandchildren. I got to
You got
meet
to
them
see all of them,
get to
right?
see
Yeah.
all the interactions with the parents, to see how parenting is. I got to see it all, which I love. I guess I should write a book about different parents and what happens
what
with their
you say.
children. And then I could see the outcomes from.
Well, I could ask you, you want to put it on tape, what you saw between all my children's
No.
interactions? Okay.
No,
But
No.
Okay, that's fair
no,
enough.
nor would I put mine on.
Fair enough.
But anyway.
By the way,
it's a
there's
great
one other
visit.
person.
I didn't do anything but hang out with Bert, which I always like to do. I feel like I get my psychologist recharging, solid psychology recharging.
But it's interesting because we are, there's a third member. A lot of our first 15 years was 3 of us, with Roberta, I, and Ira. And I always felt like much more that I'm the younger brother. But Roberta was my big sister, but we also had a baby brother. And so we're just going to acknowledge him so he's not in this video. And I hope that he and Jeremy were an important part of our lives for a lot of our lives too.
That's good.
Okay?
Yeah.
Well, then there.
Okay, we'll end here. And add some
That means that I have
videos
to
in some
get- this is
future
the-
years.
I'm going to get up and I'm going to put it on the tape.
We'll get up and show we can still walk.
Right, exactly.
This video. Right.